So good afternoon, everyone. I'm Scott McCammon, President and CEO of the Milton Chamber of Commerce, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to another episode in our Discoverability webinar series. This has been a very interesting session for us, presenting great information about how companies can hire people with disabilities. We've talked about understanding AODA. We've talked about disclosure and accommodation in the workplace. We've talked about driving profitability through an inclusive workforce. And today we're going to be talking about why companies should be joining the Discoverability Network. And joining us as our presenter today, as always, is Lisa Kelly from the Ontario Chamber of Commerce, and such an amazing resource for chambers throughout Ontario in terms of disability inclusiveness, in terms of hiring people with disabilities, in terms of AODA, and not just in terms of these seminars that we've been doing, but also an ongoing resource. If companies need any help, then Lisa is available through the Ontario Chamber. So we very much appreciate that. And of course, today's show is also being recorded by Your TV Cogeco, so we truly appreciate the support from Your TV. So Lisa, with that, I'll turn the screen over to you.
Thank you so much, Scott. And I can't think of a better partner for us than the Milton Chamber of Commerce. So I know how much you are doing up in your region, the businesses in your region. So we really, appreciate that. And we just want to expand how accessible Ontario is and expand how inclusive the employers are across the province in order to drive profitability and create a strong economy. So the first thing I'm going to do is share my slide deck. Can you see my slide deck?
Yep.
Okay, perfect. All right. So you can access the Discoverability Network at www.discoverability.network, and you'll sign in through the Halton Peel portal. Really, this is an initiative by the Ontario Chamber of Commerce. You'll see our logo on the bottom right-hand corner. And, this program is entitled the Discoverability Program. So I want to talk to you a little bit about why this was created and how it can help you. So first of all, let's talk about what it is. So the Discoverability Network has three discrete pillars that it's built upon. The first is the job matching platform, and it connects businesses directly to job seekers with a disability. Why does it do that? It actually does that because to meet your business needs, your labor market and workforce needs. It's to help you find a great candidate pool, qualified and ready to start, with a lot of great attributes that we'll talk about in a moment to help your business grow. It's free. It's more than just a job board, in that candidates create profiles, in that the matching is a little bit different. And I'll show you some examples of that in a moment. The second pillar is free training. We understand that maybe if you're a business, you say, great, I'm on board, I'd like to find these great candidates, but perhaps you don't have all the information, or you don't feel prepared, or you feel somewhat nervous about some of the concepts like disclosure and accommodations. So we're here to provide you with free training on disability, inclusive recruiting, disclosure, accommodations in the workplace, how to build an inclusive workforce, the AODA. All that's free for your employees. We'll come back numerous times if you need it. I'll even adapt the training for your own unique circumstances as a business. We also provide free training to employment service providers and job seekers. In fact, we have a weekly webinar every Thursday at 1 o'clock that can be accessed through Eventbrite and the OCC channel, and you can sign up and attend one of those webinars for free. Again, it's on a rotating number of topics. Finally, we try to create networking events. So we're slowly building this out. We're all trying to deal with this new virtual environment. I know it's been a year, but it sometimes feels like it's still new. And we're creating events that connect employers or organizations directly to job seekers. That's to build disability confidence on both sides. So people with disabilities can ask questions about your business, learn about, the opportunities you have, how they can apply, and for you as the employer to get confident talking to a wide variety of candidates and, build connections for future employment opportunities. Why did we create this program? Well, this is actually pretty important because if we look at the numbers, about 20%, it's actually 22% of Canadians have self-identified as having a disability. That's according to Statistics Canada 2017. When we look at that and break that number down, that's 6.2 million Canadians. It's a very large number, and it's growing. And it's growing because we're an aging population. And as we age, we sometimes encounter changes, perhaps to our sight, our hearing, our flexibility. So if we look, the number one self-identified disability in Canada is related to pain, flexibility, and mobility issues. So those won't necessarily be visible. So you'll see that at the third bullet point that I have there under 20% of Canadians is that most disabilities are actually non-visible. You can't see them. You can't look at someone and go, oh, that person has a disability. So we tend to make assumptions based on what we can see, the 29% of people who have disabilities, but that's not accurate. In fact, the next largest category is mental health, affecting 1 in 5 Canadians every year. So, these are giant numbers. We wouldn't want to miss over 1 out of every 5 potential employees, 1 out of 5 potential customers. So this is an important demographic. It's the largest diversity group in Canada. So we want to create programs that work for individuals both as job seekers and customers. There's a broad range of disabilities. So this is based on a medical model of this disability. So if we look at this as being a personal health condition, when I say medical model. And I show this slide not because I think that's a good definition in the workplace. I show this slide because this is usually what we think of when we think of disabilities. So categories, okay? So if we look at physical categories, people with physical disabilities, that can include people with mobility differences or impairments. That can include people with sensory, so blind, deaf, and under the mobility, that could be somebody with arthritis, that could be somebody with a limb difference, that could be somebody who uses a mobility aid, and then neurological conditions as well, which are invisible and a lot of us don't think about. Second large basket or category is developmental, cognitive, and intellectual, and we've grouped them together for this ease of understanding, and that might be people perhaps who have Down syndrome, FASD, or perhaps who are neurodiverse, so somebody who has autism. Another large category is learning, and this is growing. So we have candidates who learn and manipulate information differently. So we might think of somebody with dyscalculia or dyslexia. That has big implications for the workforce if we're affecting training or depending on some of the tasks. So it doesn't mean the person can't do it, they just do it a little differently. And finally, another big basket, mental health conditions. So that includes things like depression and anxiety, as well as other mental health disabilities like bipolar disorder. So I've just mentioned a few. Under each of these categories, we could list hundreds. You don't have to be an expert. I'm not an expert. But the idea is just to think of the breadth and start understanding that our employees or our potential employees may have these conditions. And it can affect how they do work. And we obviously, everybody does things a little bit differently. We're all unique. But they may need changes in the workplace that allow them to do their jobs well. And that's really, when we think about disability, think about it as just somebody who is experiencing the world differently than other people. So I'll get into that a bit more. The other 2 things I'd like you to remember about disability is it's affected by time. So disability can be permanent, it can be episodic, or it can be temporary. So when we think about providing accommodations for someone, that's going to affect, time is going to affect that. So if we have somebody with an episodic disability, it might mean that they go through a period where they're faced with more challenges for a discrete period of time, and then they won't need the accommodation, and then it's back. So we need to consider that when we're thinking about disability. And we also need to think that disability is affected by scale, meaning it can be mild, moderate, or severe. So you may have somebody, let's say, with a mobility disability. A mild mobility disability might be somebody with a limp. They can't walk, up a mountainside, if that was part of our park ranger job, as fast as somebody who didn't, or they might experience some pain. That looks much different than somebody with a severe mobility disability, right? So the accommodations are not going to be the same. It could be the very same disability, but very different accommodations are needed. I do not want you to leave this going, wow, that's complicated. I don't want to watch any further, Lisa. That sounds like too much, because really there's only one thing you need to know about someone's disability. You don't need to know the definition. You don't need to know the category. You don't need to know details about treatment. All you need to know is, what does that person need to be able to work effectively in the workplace? That's it. We know that this works because 77% of small businesses who've hired people with disabilities, asked them, what do you need changed? What are some things that you might do differently? Said that their employees met or exceeded expectations. Big number. That's over 3/4 of people. When we look at industries that have really high turnovers, that number is unbelievable. And we know that people with disabilities actually have higher than average retention rates and company loyalty. That makes them a great candidate pool to draw from. They're still able to do the job, but they'll stay longer. That lowers our hiring and onboarding and training costs. Now, you're probably thinking, yeah, but it's going to cost me money for those changes you keep mentioning, Lisa, but that's not true. So first of all, the majority of accommodations that are provided in the workplace are not related to disability. They're related to family, personal, or religious reasons. Okay, so disability accommodations are only 5% of all accommodation requests. So the good news about that is you're already, as a business, an expert in providing accommodations. If you manage people, you've provided accommodations at some point, I guarantee you. Perhaps you've had somebody who, especially during COVID, has a family member who's ill and needs to take off a week to care for them or have reduced hours. That's an accommodation. Still a great candidate, you don't want to lose them, but for a temporary amount of time, you're allowing them a change in their work hours or their work circumstances. For myself, an accommodation during COVID, just like for a lot of other people, has been working from home. And we've been able to do it. For years, we've said, no, you won't be as productive working from home. And COVID has shown us all that we're able to do that. When we do provide accommodations, and not all people with disabilities ask for them, okay? When people do, 60% of those accommodations cost absolutely nothing. They're to do with flexibility and a flexible approach, maybe around hours, starting times, how long lunch breaks are, standing up and stretching, okay? 93% of accommodations that are provided are a one-time cost of less than $500. So that's pretty minimal when we look at the cost of recruiting, onboarding, and lost opportunity costs. Now, if you're a small business, you may not have an HR department. We can help you. We can provide you with links to really amazing toolkits like the Conference Board of Canada's toolkit that has policies, paperwork, forms that you can that can help you with all these things that I'm talking about. We'll also help you with finding talent, training your staff, finding, supporting you. So perhaps you say, well, this candidate I hired needs a training support. We'll connect you to a local service provider, okay? We'll make recommendations to you. So we're here to be the indispensable partner of business across Ontario, including Milton. Additional benefits. Well, I told you that hiring people with disabilities has a positive effect on overall business performance. So let's dig down into what that means. First of all, there's cost savings, up to 72% higher staff retention, and the entire staff turnover is lowered by as much as 30%. So everybody benefits. Productivity, 90% of employees with disability rate average or above average on performance, 86% rate average or better on attendance, and 98% of employees with disabilities rate average or better on safety as compared to employees without a disability. Those are amazing numbers. This is a really good candidate pool to draw from. And they're underemployed, okay? Companies that have diverse workforces actually perform better financially, so they make more money. We also know there's a large consumer market attached to that. 1 in 5 Canadians has a disability. That means some of your customers or your consumers are people with disabilities, and they tend to spend more per shopping trip, shop more often, and be less likely to be swayed by coupons or deals. So they make a great customer for you. Disability inclusive companies average 28% higher revenue, 2 times the net income, and 30% better performance on economic profit margins. So there are a whole host of reasons why being an inclusive employer, which means hiring people with disabilities, can be good for your business. So if there's such a great business case for this, why aren't more people with disabilities employed? In fact, they're employed at a lower rate than people without disabilities, almost half. Number one is attitudes. So our own misconceptions, unconscious bias, stigma about the competency and productivity of employees with disabilities. So we actually have a training that addresses this, that tries to, help you identify some of those things that you may be thinking that aren't perhaps accurate. I've already mentioned some of the positives. Those are usually, the corollary is the assumption that, oh, it's going to cost us a lot. They're not going to work as much. They're going to take sick days off. That's not true. So you've got the facts and figures that I just mentioned before, but we're happy to come in and give you some more training on that as well. There's usually misconceptions about costs. Again, the idea that, oh, I'm going to have to put in an elevator. You're not. Or I shouldn't say, most of the time you aren't. But we have to address that. We know that most accommodations, 93% are going to be a one-time cost of less than $500. And finally, capacity. So again, we're here to help you with that. I told you that I don't love the medical model of disability for use in the workplace. So it's great if you're a health professional, but if you're not, there's other ways we can think about disability that are more productive and kind of empower us to become more inclusive and more innovative. So think of disability as a mismatched interaction between the person and the features of the environment in which they work or live. So what do I mean by that? Well, what I mean is perhaps somebody uses a mobility aid and maybe they use an assistive device like a walker or a cane. And you have very crowded aisles in your store. And so they're not able to maneuver well. All you'd simply have to do is widen your aisles or remove clutter, and suddenly that now space works for somebody using that mobility aid. Another example might be somebody who learns differently. So perhaps we've created training that somebody has to read through a really dense book, okay? Some people don't learn that way, with or without a disability, frankly. So you might create a live training using a local service provider to help that person go through your 2-week training course in a different way. Once they've learned it, and you're done. It might be things like giving somebody a checklist of things that they need to do during the day as reminders. There's lots of different ways that we can address that mismatch. We just have to figure out what it is. So the best way to do that is ask the person, how do you do this? How do you do this? How might you do this part of the job? And they'll usually have a pretty good idea of what they need. So we don't need to be experts. We just need to know to ask the person we've hired, what do you need changed to either our processes or our workplaces so that you can do your job? That's called an accommodation. okay? And don't think of accommodations as additions. They're actually ways to improve people's productivity. What employer doesn't want to improve productivity? The essential duties of the job still get performed and standards are not lowered. So I'm going to use a personal example from my own experience. When COVID happened, I could no longer train in person. Typically, I might give a training like this anywhere between 1 to 3 hours, and we'd break it up. So my accommodations for my employers, because I'm now working virtually, is we're giving shorter but more frequent sessions. And that's easier to do, frankly, because I don't have to travel, so I don't lose travel time. So it's actually forced us to be innovative, and it's actually allowed us the opportunity to provide more training to more employers across Ontario. So it can be a good thing. What does the job seeker need? Well, these are probably general categories, changes. These are accommodations that might address assumptions. So you might need some unconscious bias training, some disability inclusion training. Changes to the way we communicate. Maybe somebody works better getting things in a written format that they can review rather than taking it all in by listening to someone for half an hour in the morning and trying to remember it. That could be a change to the way we communicate. Sometimes it might be things like assistive technology. So a screen enhancement software or a voice to text software on a computer. It could be changes to processes and approaches. So when I say that, that's a harder one for some people to understand. But let's say we have a recruitment process and we always go to the same place to hire people. That's actually not very inclusive because it means we're going to keep hiring the same type of person that is found in that place. So if we want to have diverse candidates, we probably need to look at different places to find candidates. So if you want to find somebody who has a disability, we're a great pathway for you. You could use our system. So we're just asking you to reconsider the way that, who you're recruiting from. It might be how you're recruiting. So perhaps your job postings are overly complicated. Perhaps your interviews are set up in such a way that they, don't work for everyone. So you're not really hiring, when you think about it, for the candidate who interviews best, you're hiring for the best candidate. So you need to design your interview to give you data that shows you which is the best candidate, not which is the best person who does the interview. There might be changes to your spaces and places. So I've got a picture of a sit-stand desk. That might be an example, or an ergonomic keyboard. If you need a roadmap, we actually have one on our website. So you can go to discoverability.network/business/roadmap, and we'll actually take you through the 5 steps: how to find talent, how to interview and hire, including questions, formats, how to onboard, some links to information about accommodations, and finally how to promote your success, which usually involves you talking to me, and I'll try to promote you across the province and share your success stories. How do you get started? Well, you sign up on our system. As an employer, it's a free account. There's free resources, that are available on our website. We will give you free training or support. You can reach out to Sophia on our team. You've got her email there, and you can join us on an employer panel or networking event. If you just want to get started and sign up to look for talent, you go to the top upper right-hand corner to this bright yellow button that says Find Talent, and you create your account. So to access talent, you go to haltonpeel.discoverability.network/business, select your business, select Halton Peel, find talent, the yellow button. How does it work? You create an account, a job seeker creates an account. The system, you post your jobs, the system will match you. The person gets the first right of refusal, so they'll apply if they're interested. You review the qualified candidates, you connect with them to, have a regular interview process. So it's pretty simple. You post your jobs, you get matched, you review the potential candidates, you have an interview, and then you're back to your regular recruiting cycle. The Ontario Chamber of Commerce is providing you with free tools, training, Toolkits, the job matching platform to help you recruit qualified candidates with a disability. Please reach out to us. Follow us on Twitter, Facebook at Hireability Now, or join our LinkedIn page. Thank you so much. And are there any questions?
Yeah, Lisa, I think I'll mention first that your PowerPoint will be available on the Milton Chamber of Commerce website as well. So if anyone didn't get the information or the contact details, just find it on the Milton Chamber website. And it strikes me, we've talked about this in some of the previous sessions, and you mentioned it today, but part of it is ask the person.
Yeah,
If you're wondering what to do about accommodations, if you're wondering if people need accommodations, ask.
absolutely. It takes away the fear, Scott, doesn't it? Like if you just ask someone, what do you need to be your best at work? Somebody will tell you.
And as you know, I think the challenge for some employers is they're afraid of the answer, right?
Yes.
And but I think, through the presentation today, where you've talked about, the fact that accommodations, might not be that onerous. In fact, they're, for the most part, it doesn't even cost money. And if it does cost money, it's under $500 for the most part. But you shouldn't be afraid of asking the question, because the answer is not that scary.
And actually, so a couple points to that. I'm so glad you brought that up, Scott. So a couple things. Number one, there's research out just last year published that shows for every dollar you invest in accommodations, you get $28 back. That seems like a pretty good thing to do. Number two, you do get a say in what those accommodations are as the employer. So, I was overcome by the noise when I first joined the chamber. You can see my lovely offices that are very quiet behind me. But during COVID, it was very loud, or just prior to COVID, it was very, very loud. So I went to my boss and said, can I have an office? And he said, well, what's the issue? And I said, I find it overwhelming. I can't concentrate. And he goes, how about we get you headsets? And instead of getting an office, I got headsets, but they work just as well. So it doesn't have to be you as the employer get the say of what the accommodation is going to be. And it's a discussion. And I'm delighted by these. I wear them all the time. Even when I'm working from home in front of a green screen, I love them.
Lisa, you also talked about the statistics around retention rates, about, again, the low cost of accommodation. But it strikes me that the other thing that happens through accommodation, through hiring persons with disabilities, is pride. The companies can be very proud of their accomplishments, and I think that resonates not just through the senior levels of a company, but I think everyone starts to realize that their employer is a caring employer and is willing to make these accommodations, and that may make them come forward with their own accommodations. So
I think that, again, when we looked at those stats, when we looked at that retention rate stat, right, about people with disabilities are 72%, stay longer. I think the more interesting is, but overall staff with or without disability also improves, because yes, what employee doesn't want to work for a company that respects you, values you, understands your life's going to go through changes at different points and be there for you, and you're going to want to be there to give back as well. I think also it affects the customer decision. 53% of Canadians are touched by disability. So when I say that, what I mean is they have a friend or family member who has a disability, and they actually make purchase decisions based on that. So it's pride in knowing I work for an organization that is doing this, and I'm going to spread that to the community. It's great. It's pride in what you are, and pride that you work at a company, and consumers, come to you because of that. And you talked in the presentation about companies that may have to widen their aisles to accommodate walkers or people with disabilities. But it strikes me too that as we move into an online shopping world more and more, there are also accommodations that companies have to think about as they're building websites or as they're trying to provide services to their customers. Absolutely. So this year, under the AODA in Ontario, the Accessibility for Ontarians with Disabilities Act, you're required to have a WCAG 2.0 accessible website, and you have to report on that by June. And yeah, we have to build accessibility across our spaces and places, and that includes virtual. And I think for businesses, again, during COVID, when we think about that, businesses that have been able to, you know, maybe you've hired young people and they've been really helpful at helping you set up digital, you know, services. I was reading about a restaurant here in town, and she had some young servers who actually, when it closed down, helped her create a website. And she's now doing takeout and doesn't want to even go back to in-service dining. And that was because, again, having young people, which is another diversity group, right? People with disabilities are often pretty good at tech because you work from home a little bit more sometimes than other groups. That's not a blanket statement because there's so many different types of disabilities, but you want to look for the right candidates that will be able to offer you those diverse perspectives so you can pivot when changes come along like COVID.
It's also a good segue into, you know, as we talk about AODA and the website requirements, it's a good segue into why people need to use you and the Ontario Chamber as a resource. Because if they don't know about that, if that's making them nervous, then their first phone call should be to you.
Yeah, so, you know, there's 5 AODA standards: customer service training, which we should all be doing right now, information and communications. We've got some real tips for you on that. We even provide free training on how to make documents accessible. You've got then the employment and hiring standard. You've got the transportation standard and the built structures. So yes, please contact us, let us know. All you have to do is use our system to try to recruit people, and we'd be happy to provide you with training and links. All the resources on our website are free, and we're always here to answer questions. If we don't know the answer, we'll, you know, connect you to somebody who does.
You know, we've talked about just asking, but I think the challenge that we've had in this last year, the obvious challenge of you know, not seeing one another and working remotely, you know, it also is a challenge to keep in touch with your employees because, you know, their accommodation needs may have changed during COVID, and some of it, you know, are the obvious things around the accommodations in their home workplace now, but their own physical. There may have been changes in their physicality that requires accommodations. But as an employer, as you're, you know, trying to interact on Zoom or by phone, you may not be aware of those. So again, it comes back to just ask. But how does an employer, you know, look for signals or kind of know when they should be asking?
What a great question. So I don't think we can rely on people to send us signals. So we can be observant. Maybe there's been a change in how often people communicate, whether they're showing up on screen. Those can be signals that maybe things are more challenging or people are facing challenges. I think we just need to ask, and we need to check in. You know, I'm actually thinking of creating a training on just, okay, how do we, exactly what you're talking about during COVID, what are we looking for? How do we support each other through this new digital environment? Because I think we're going to be facing it, unfortunately, for a while. I think having regular chats prior to on-screen interactions, just like, how are you doing, Scott? How are things going? How is it working from home? That isn't like right into the meeting, not backing meeting up after meeting after meeting, giving people breaks, giving them the opportunity to be on screen or off screen. I do have, you know, for me as a trainer, it's very difficult to train when people are off screen because I can't see if they're connecting to the material. So while I understand people get Zoom fatigue, sometimes we might need to check in just so, like you said, you can see if somebody looks maybe like they're struggling or having difficulties. And sometimes just because we need a friendly face going back and forth. But I think we need to ask, you know, some of the things that have come up that I've been seeing as people's workstations need to become like more ergonomic, because maybe you're at home, you haven't ever prepared for that because you never thought you'd be working at a desk in your house. Maybe you need a green screen because you've got people walking behind you. And if you're on a lot of meetings, that seems uncomfortable or awkward. So there's lots of different things we might need to accommodate in a virtual world. Start by asking, you know, and then, you know, I think the big thing is the Zoom fatigue and just having those normal coffee chats around the water cooler that don't happen, and trying to create those in some form.
We'll have to have like a green screen with a virtual water cooler.
Yeah, that's actually really good. I like that. Yeah.
So Lisa, that covers off all the questions that we had. Is there anything that we didn't cover that you want to talk about?
I think this is a great candidate pool to recruit from. I work with a lot of employers. They are just so delighted when they get this right, and it brings in such diverse perspectives. It is something you can take pride in as an organization. I think as we move into a new generation of workers, as you know, boomers retire, a lot of the new workers, social responsibility means a lot to them. So I think there's an appeal to that. They want to be able to work someplace that they're proud of, that represents the values that they do. I think it's building a better Canada, a better Ontario. So hopefully, if you have any questions, call me, but hopefully people have been convinced by the messaging. And if you want to challenge me, call me. If you want to join up, call me, but we're here to answer any questions and support businesses across the province.
That's great. Thanks, Lisa. I mean, we talked about it at the beginning of the program, but you know, this whole webinar series that we've been able to do around discoverability, all of the resources that you and the Ontario Chamber provide, it's just so amazing, and we're happy as the Milton Chamber of Commerce to spread the word as much as we can, because it's such an important topic.
Well, thank you. You've been such a huge advocate, Scott. You've been so like a leader in this, helping us get started in this. So we really appreciate it too. And you know, we're so delighted that our local chambers are taking part. So, yay.
And with that, we'll close off the show, and with a thank you again to Your TV and Cogeco for being a valued partner in spreading the message as well. So thank you for tuning in. Thank you, Lisa, and stay safe.
Okay, have a great day. We'll talk to you all later. Bye.
Thanks. Bye-bye.